Good morning, everybody. And as always, thanks very much for taking the time to come along to the session today. So we'll just get into it, I think, and if anybody else is a minute or two late coming into the session, they can just join when they need to. So yeah, as I said, thanks very much for taking the time to come to the session today, where we'll be looking at managing Canvas assignments and grading and feedback. And really, this is just done with a view to, I suppose, results becoming available to students over the next period and just being able to make use of all the features within Canvas that can allow for the addition of grades and feedback and the release of same to students. So in terms of what I'm looking to cover today, it'll be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm hoping to cover assignment settings, quiz settings, just making sure those are okay, how to find submitted assignments, using Speedgrader to provide marks, feedback, so on and so forth, marking quizzes, looking at the gradebook, and then some other just general tips and tricks that I found handy myself for marking and feedback. If you do have any questions, please do feel free to throw them into the chat area or into the Q&A function within Zoom. And if you're joining us through YouTube, please feel free to throw any questions into the YouTube live chat. And I'm joined here today by my the redoubtable Shane Cronin, who will flag any of those to me. So please feel free to add in any questions or comments, and if we don't get to them during the session, we'll certainly cover them at the end of the session. Maybe just to begin, it's no harm to maybe just be aware in terms of supports that are available to you. So if you do find yourself over the next while having any difficulties in using Canvas to make marks available to students, or you can't see student work or anything at all, our main kind of recommendation is the tier 1 support. And I suppose the reason we recommend that is because it's available 24/7. And what we found most useful is the live web chat, and that just puts you in touch with a Canvas support agent directly, who will be able to, who knows Canvas inside out, and who will be able to actually go into the module that you're looking at and help you solve any problems. So again, just the way you get at that is you simply go down to the help area inside in Canvas, and from here you can select the web chat, and that will open up a new window and put you in touch with the Canvas support agent straight away. Like I said, we recommend web chat because it's kind of the quickest, it's the most direct, and it's the most straightforward. But if you wish to, you can also submit a ticket to Canvas, which is done through emailing support@instructure.com, or again, in the help menu, there's the option there to submit a ticket to Canvas. And there is also a telephone number that Canvas provide also. But like I said, and I certainly have found the live web chat the most straightforward way of getting help if you have any difficulties. So if you're ever stuck in terms of using or doing or having any problems with anything at all in Canvas, that support option is always available to you. For elements which don't relate to Canvas, so for example, any kind of Wi-Fi issues, any kind of issues that you might be having with your machine, you can contact Service Desk. That's obviously the old address. That's the artist formerly known. We're now the artist formerly known as CIT. But if you email servicedesk@mtu.ie, that will provide you with support around enrollments, account access, anything at all like that. And any other Canvas related queries, we would recommend you get onto tier 1 about. Just in terms, excuse me, of the Department of TEL as well, we do have a number of resources available on our website, which is at tel.cit.ie. Excuse me. And we have a number of guidelines available for staff and students. Rather than trying to remember all of those, what's easiest usually is to simply go into the support option on our website up here, select I am a lecturer, and from there everything is made available to you, including the staff knowledge guides, where you can search through a variety of help articles to try and find the information that you need. We also obviously have a YouTube channel where we put up the recordings of all our training sessions, such as this one. So if you're finding I'm going quite fast or going through material quite quickly, you can always watch the recording afterwards on our YouTube channel, or kind of go back to reference that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to get straight into the Canvas environment to try and demonstrate some of the features that, or some of the elements that I was talking about earlier. So I suppose a lot of the time, what can be the case is if you do encounter difficulties in terms of being able to view student work or students not being able to submit, it's usually good to maybe just double check that the assignments and that your quizzes are set up how they need to be. So if I go into an assignment that I've already set up and I click on the edit button up here, generally most of this is set up as standard, and I'm sure you're all quite familiar with it. But maybe just no harm to remind ourselves, inside in Canvas or inside in the Canvas assignments, generally I would recommend setting points to 100. It just makes life easier. But the main element in terms of if, for example, students find you're getting emails from students that they can't actually upload to a Canvas assignment, usually it's one of two things. So the first one is to make sure that the submission type is set to online and that it's set to file upload. Obviously, there are other options available if you wish to use them, but very often it can be the case that something might be, for example, set no submission, set on paper, or if none of these are ticked under online, it means that students won't be able to submit against this assignment. So just making sure that the submission type is set to online, and usually that online is set to file upload. More often than not, if students can't upload, it might be something related to this. The other big area which might get in the way of students being able to submit to an assignment is down here under assign. So by default, an assignment is set to everybody, and all that means is all the students enrolled in this module can upload against it. The due date is the deadline by which this assignment should be submitted to. But the thing is, after students can still upload to the assignment after the due date has passed, the system will just mark it to you that they've uploaded late. So that's usually not a problem either, although it is good to have a deadline in there. Available from, however, and available until basically identifies from when this assignment will be visible to students and after which date and time the assignment will no longer be visible to students. So generally, I tend to leave these blank so long as I have the deadline. I usually don't really have to worry about students being able to access the file. But if I do set an available from time, let's say, for example, today at 12, and I set an available until time to next Tuesday at midnight. What that means is that up before that date, students will not be able to see this assignment, and after this date, students won't be able to see the assignment. So generally, I tend to leave those blank because I want students to be able to have access to the assignment, and I also think it's kind of confusing for students if things are appearing and disappearing out of the system. But if you do set those, just be aware that means at certain points, the assignment will be invisible to students. So if students are complaining that they can't see it, that could well be an issue. So generally just making sure that the settings for your assignment are correct and making sure that the assignment is published inside here. If it's unpublished, then students obviously won't be able to see that. The same is very much true for quizzes. So if I just click into the quiz that we have set up here, again, maybe the difference between assignments and quizzes is more often than not, a lot of lecturers want a quiz to only be available within the system for a certain amount of time. Because obviously you want all students to take the quiz and have access to the questions coming from the quiz, at the same time for a set period. I guess generally you wouldn't want one student being able to kind of take the quiz much earlier than everybody else, because they then will have an idea of what questions are going to come up within the quiz. So more often than not, we might set an available from and until time for a quiz. But again, it's usually not a problem. It's just something to make sure. It's just a question of making sure that the quiz is only showing up for the period that you want it to, and maybe just being aware that if if the available from and until times are too restrictive or they're not entirely clear, then it just means that students might have difficulty getting into a quiz. So for this, for example, I've made it available from tomorrow at 12 up until tomorrow at 1. So just double checking the available and the until times for a quiz is the main thing that you need to do. And generally, if students can't access a quiz, it usually does come down to just making sure that these times are correct, that the date is correct, and that the time is correct. Excuse me. In terms of actually getting at student work and marking student work, then for assignments, the main tool that we would use to do this is something called Speedgrader. So Speedgrader is basically Canvas's, I suppose, marking and feedback tool. The way that we can use that is we simply click into the assignment, which students have submitted against, and up in the top right corner, you'll see here, there's a number of options. So we have our Speedgrader option. The other option which is available to us is that we can download student submissions. And what this will do is if we click it, it will simply create a zip file and it will allow me to download that onto my machine. So if I want to, I can, mark students' work or view students' work on my own machine and kind of add in marks and feedback like that if I so wish to. But Speedgrader is genuinely quite a useful tool in terms of being able to offer marks and feedback to students. So within Speedgrader, this is kind of the general environment where the student's work will be displayed over on the left-hand side, and then we have a number of options up along the top of this area for annotations, and along the right-hand side then for adding marks and feedback. So when we wish to add marks to the student work, so when we're happy to give them a mark for what they've submitted, very simply what we can do is we can click over into the grade area and we can add in the mark that we wish to in there. Now you'll notice as well, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, when I add in that mark, this kind of hidden item comes up. So we'll come back to that later when we're talking about just kind of controlling when students can see marks and they can't see feedback. But generally, when we want to add a grade, we simply add it into this area over on the right-hand side. The other thing which we can do is, if we wish to, we can add kind of, I guess, general feedback into this kind of assignment comments area here. So what I would tend to do is I would give students their mark here, and in here I would give them what I would describe as general feedback. So in general, very good work, very well researched, structure, etc. is good, so on and so forth. So the main element really here is just that we can add general feedback into this assignment comment area down here. So that's good for general kind of feedback. If I wanted to give more specific feedback, what I can do is I can use the annotation tools which are available at the top of this left-hand area over here. So obviously there's options in terms of zooming in and zooming out and so on and so forth. But what's quite useful in here are a number of tools which are available to me up here. So one is just this pin tool, and basically all this means is I can click anywhere on the page to drop a pin, and then I can add a comment in if I so wish. So I might say excellent paper to use. Most of the tools which are up here really kind of, I suppose, provide that same purpose. If I want to, I can highlight text, and again, that allows me to add in a comment. So again, very good source. And there is also this text tool, which if I want to, will simply allow me to drop in text according to a particular area. So for example, I might say excellent opening paragraph. The other feature, and this might be useful maybe if there's a graphical element to students' work. So if they're giving you, for example, a diagram, if they're giving you some form of graphic, anything at all like that, you can have an area annotation, which is really just drawing over a particular area. And again, you can simply add in a comment in this area. You can change the color if you want to, so on and so forth. And then just the final tool is a strike through tool, which might be useful if you just want to kind of identify this is not relevant, so on and so forth. So between the kind of general feedback and the specific annotation tools available to me up here, you can give quite detailed feedback to students on their work. Another feature which is useful in Speedgrader is also this thing called a comment library. So for example, I often find that kind of when I'm reviewing student work, I tend to say the same things again and again and again. So instead of having to, essentially type the same thing multiple times into this general kind of comment area, something which is available to me is a comment library. And I can access the comment library by simply clicking on this little kind of speech bubble icon here. And what a comment library does is it very simply just kind of gives me access to a number of sentences, paragraphs, comments that I can drop into the kind of comment area if I so wish. So I have a number of them set up here, but if we wanted to add a new comment to the library, for example, I might say very well written, used word count well. Yeah, we'll just put that in. And if I want to, I can click add to library and that adds it here. Alternatively, I might said structure not very good, word count underused, and add that to the library. Depending then on the student's work, what I might do is I might simply go into my comment library and I might say very well written, word count used, go back in, good introduction, add add more images, so on and so forth. Where this is particularly useful is if you, like I said, if you have particular, if you find that you're kind of saying the same thing again and again, and you could broadly even categorize students' work into kind of a couple of different kind of general kind of feedbacks. So for example, the student did everything right, the student did most things right, the student did a lot of things wrong. You could go into your comment library. Apologies, everyone. I think I dropped off for a moment there. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen again. And apologies, that was just that appeared to be an EduRoam issue on my end. So I think I just dropped off for a second there. Hopefully everybody can still hear me okay. You might please just let me know in the chat area if I'm back and if you can hear me all right.
All good there, Dara.
Thanks, Shane. Would you mind making me host so I can share my screen?
Sure, 2 seconds. Okay.
Thanks very much, Shane, and apologies for that, everyone. So like I was saying, when I am happy with the mark and the feedback that I've given the students, what I can do is I can add in their grade, I can put in their comment, and I can hit submit. And from there, I can move on to the next student using the arrows or the drop down up here along the top. Now, something that you might come across as well in terms of getting submissions from students is that some students might upload multiple times. So for example, this particular student uploaded on the 10th of January and then uploaded again on the 26th of January. So the thing to watch out for here, or the thing to keep an eye out for here really is basically just when I come into Speedgrader here, you'll notice this student only uploaded once. So up in the top right corner, it simply says submitted on this date and time. With this student, I know that they've submitted more than once because there's a drop down up here, which identifies, okay, they've submitted more than once. So basically the thing to keep an eye out for here is just this drop down up in the top right corner. It just means that a student has uploaded multiple times. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. It might be the case that a student uploads the wrong file, or they upload and then they improve their work and then they upload another time. Speedgrader will always show you the most recent submission from a student. So when you access a student's work in Speedgrader, it'll always be the most recent one. But yeah, maybe no harm just to be aware that they might upload late or they might upload multiple times. An additional element is if a student uploads late, Speedgrader will flag that for me with this little late item up in the top right corner. That doesn't affect marks or anything automatically. It's maybe just flagging it to me that the student has uploaded late. And if it does, if it is the case that I know a student has uploaded late, but that's okay, I can click on this pencil icon. And if I want to, I can identify that the student is excused from this assignment, or if I click none, it will just remove that late element from it. So that's more for my own, I suppose, edification or my own kind of awareness more than anything else, but it's no harm to be aware of it. An additional quite useful feature in terms of providing students with feedback, if it's of use to you, is one feature which is available is that down here, under the general kind of comment area, you'll see there's a number of buttons. And what this will allow me to do is if I click on this paperclip one, it will allow me to add a file. So if I want to, I might be able to provide the student with, look, this is a good example of what a good assignment in this kind of area looks like. But an additional kind of cool feature is if I want to, I can click on this media comment button. And what that will do basically is it will give me access to the microphone and camera that I'm currently using. So if I want to, I can give students video feedback. And I suppose the benefit of this is that it saves me having to type multiple times for every single student. If I wanted to give them quite kind of general feedback or even make the feedback a little more personable, what I might do is I might pull this up, I might start recording, and I might say, hey, John, really good work. Overall, I have very little kind of feedback for you. Your structure was excellent. It was very well written. You used the word count well. You referenced very well. Maybe something to watch out for is just in your conclusions and recommendations, they could tie back into the points you made in the essay a little bit more. And when I click on that, I can save media, and then that is going to appear as a comment for this particular student. So that is something which is quite useful. And if I want to, there's also an audio only option for that as well. So that can be quite a nice alternative to having to type in text to the chat area for every single student. As you saw there, I gave what I thought was like okay feedback, and all of that was done within 20 seconds of my own time. So an additional element then is just maybe, yeah, I'll come back in a moment to talk about making marks available via via Speedgrader. But maybe just before I do so, one quite useful feature as well, if you do in terms of being able to give marks and feedback, is the ability to add rubrics to particular assignments. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to hop into a blank assignment. The way in which we can add a rubric to a particular assignment is simply when we've set up the assignment, like so, can simply click on the rubric option. And from here, you can create a rubric if you want to by adding additional criterion, adding additional kind of ratings, or if you have one created already, you can find a rubric. So simply clicking on this find a rubric button will allow me to pull up, for example, this basic rubric that I created earlier. And when I click on that, it basically kind of adds it to the assignment. So the way that I can use a rubric within an assignment is very simply, if I come out to the assignment page, I can click on the edit button up here for this particular rubric. And what that will allow me to do is allow me to, change how the rubric functions, what the different kind of feedback for the different areas is. But down here as well, there's a number of options which will determine how I want to use this rubric. So I have this rubric set up to be overall 100 points, 20 for this criterion, 40 for that criterion, 40 for that criterion. But I might not want to use the points elements of it. So if I want to, I can simply click remove points from rubric. So then it's purely feedback. It's not really concerned with points. It's just a way of being able to give feedback to students. Alternatively, I can click on this option to use this rubric for assignment grading. And what that means is what I select in the rubric will kind of insert the mark that the student gets based on what I've selected in the rubric. But to be honest, what I find most useful is to simply leave that blank. And what you do then in Speedgrader is for any of the student work that I'm looking at, I can simply click here on View Rubric. And if I just drag this across to make it a bit more visible, what this will allow me to do then is I can say, okay, their sentence structure, grammar, mechanics, and spelling was very good. The focus and detail was okay. The overall structure was okay. And you see there that automatically puts in points. And it's identified the feedback to the students. If I want to, I can give additional feedback by clicking on this little comment feature here. So I can put in additional kind of information against the different criteria if I so wish. And when I hit save, what that will do is you'll see there, it adds the mark that to the student's work if I so wish. But generally, but you don't have to be bound by that. I can always go, actually, it's more like 78, like It's more like 72% that the student got. So the rubric is useful maybe as a way of selecting specific, I suppose, excuse me, in terms of selecting quite general kind of achievements by the student, but I can always manipulate the kind of final mark if I so wish. And again, the way that I can use this is I can simply click View Rubric. I can select what the student has done, how the student generally has scored, but then I can come back in here and I can say, okay, well, that's really more like 15. That's for that they really, it's more like 30. For that, it's really more like 22. And then again, that will recalculate the score. So when I hit, when I hit save, that will then give me 67% based on the calculation of the rubric. But again, I can always change that if I so wish. So in terms then of marking quizzes, quizzes are somewhat more straightforward. Once I have my quiz set up, I can simply click into it. I can go into the build area. And the way that I can add marks to the quiz then is by going into the moderate area. Now, the difference with quizzes is that if a quiz is comprised, for example, completely of, if a quiz is comprised entirely of questions that are automatically kind of answered and calculated. So if the quiz is all multiple choice questions or true false questions or anything like that, then the score will be calculated automatically. But it might often be the case in a quiz that you might ask a student to write a to answer a short text question, to kind of like write in a free form manner. For example, with this quiz, I have questions that are automatically calculated, like this one, or like this hotspot down here. But I've also put in a question where I ask students to type in their answer. And anywhere that I have a student, anywhere that I've asked a student to do that, I do need to go into the quiz, go into the moderate area, click on the student attempt, and then give them identify if this is correct or incorrect. So in this case, it's clearly incorrect. I'm going to hit X, and you see there that identifies that the student gets 0 points. If I go into another student's work, and I identify that they've answered this correctly, I can simply click on the tick icon here. That will give them the amount of marks going for the question, and I can hit update, and that will update their score. So in general, that's the main kind of that's the main process of giving marks within a quiz. If questions can be automatically calculated, they will be, but anywhere where I've asked students to put in their own text, I will have to go in and I'll have to look at their work and identify if that is correct or if it's incorrect. In terms of making marks available to students, then the main way that we can do that, or the most useful tool for doing this, is inside in the gradebook. So if I click into the gradebook under grades in my module, I'll have access to all of the different all of the different kind of assignments which students are asked to complete, and any grades that I've already given them. Now, by default, what's referred to as the posting policy in Canvas, in all Canvas modules in MTU Cork, is set to manual posting. And all this means is that basically I can give a student marks, I can give them feedback, but they're not going to be able to see those marks and feedback for any of the assignments or the quizzes or so on and so forth until I take the additional step of making it available to them. And you can find the grade posting policy by going into the grades area, clicking on this cog icon. And there's two options in there. One is to automatically apply I don't want to say punishment, I suppose negative marks, so you can automatically kind of lower a student's grade or apply a deduction, I should say, to late submissions. And the grade posting policy then, as you'll see, is to manually post grades, which is where grades and feedback are hidden by default, or automatically post grades, which is where grades and feedback will be visible to students the second I enter them. So by default, all Canvas modules, the grading policy is set to post grades. And the main reason for that is, for example, over the past month, students, I might wish to mark students' work, but students really shouldn't have access to the marks and the feedback that I give them, for example, within Speedgrader, until the marks and feedback have been officially released to them through Web for Faculty. So I don't want to create a situation where students are meant to get, for example, their official marks for last semester at the end of this month, and I've unwittingly made all of that available to them before the end of this month through Canvas. So that's the reason that kind of marks and feedback are kind of hidden by default in your Canvas modules. When you have added your marks and feedback to students, it's a very simple process of being able to make it available to them. All I need to do is I need to go into the gradebook, and each of the assessments that I've given them is a column inside here. So what I can do is I can simply click on the menu here. I can go to post grades, and what that will do is it will simply give me the option to make grades available to everyone or to only the students who I've given grades and feedback to. And what I can do is I can click post, and that will then send all of the marks and feedback out to students all at once. Within Speedgrader, and again, the option is available to you if you want to hide those in much the same way. And you'll notice here when marks and feedback are hidden, there is this little icon which identifies that students can't see them. When I do post grades and feedback, that disappears. Another way of doing this, if I want to, is if I go into Speedgrader, what I can do is I can simply click on that eye icon inside in Speedgrader, and that will allow me to post all of the grades to students. That's also why when I enter in grades for students, automatically it comes up as hidden. But if I post the grades, either from the gradebook or from within Speedgrader, you'll see that that little kind of hidden icon disappears. And all of that is then all students' marks and all students' feedback is available to them in that instance. And the same with the quizzes. In general, kind of the main kind of feature in terms of a quiz, which you want to check for, is inside in the settings for a quiz, you simply want to make sure that restrict student result view is selected so that basically students can't see whether they got a question right or whether they got a question wrong. But then again, by default, quiz results are going to be hidden until I come in here, click on this icon, and I hit post grades, and then that will send the students their marks and feedback all at once. An additional feature which might be useful to you is, for example, let's say a student can upload to Canvas, they just email me a particular assignment. If I want to, I can simply kind of add, if I'm in a hurry, what I can do is I can simply add the mark that I want to give them by going into the gradebook, clicking into the particular cell. So this is for test student, for the sample assignment I gave them. And I can simply add that, and that will then allow me to enter in a grade directly. Similarly, if I click into a cell and I click on this little arrow icon to the right-hand side, I can identify, okay, they had a good excuse, so this isn't actually late, or they're excused from doing this assignment, and again, I can simply put in the grade in here, and if I want to, I can put in some general feedback in here as well. So the gradebook is handy just in terms of being able to add in kind of details quite quickly and easily. If I want to as well, something which I can do, so let's say, for example, when I'm getting ready to submit all of the students' information for this feature into Web for Faculty, something which is quite useful is to go up to Actions in the gradebook and export entire gradebook. And what that will do is it will simply give me a CSV file, which I can open up in Excel. And that's kind of useful in terms of just being able to help me kind of work out calculations and weighting and so on and so forth inside in, so I can kind of add in the details as required into Web for Faculty. An additional feature, maybe just kind of as a final tip and trick, which I might leave you with, is there is some useful features as well for following up once I've given students once I've given them their marks and their feedback. There's a couple of useful features within the gradebook which I can use to help kind of, I suppose, yeah, follow up on kind of the marks and the feedback I've given. So if I go into the gradebook and let's say for this sample assignment, something which I can do is, again, I click on the menu at the top of the column. And from here, what I can do is I can select message students who. Now, what this will allow me to do is it will allow me to compose a message, and that message will be sent to, based on what I select from this dropdown, specific students. So a very common one is I might say, okay, students who scored less than, let's say, for the sake of argument, 65 inside in this module, or let's say if we say students who scored more than 80, it'll send 3 students. But if a student scored less than 65 in this particular module, what I can do is I can add in a message that will be sent directly to them. So I might say, hey, I noticed that you maybe didn't do as well as you could have on that last assignment. I'm attaching a sample of a good submission for this particular assignment. So you should review that and maybe see if that kind of work, what changes you might make to your own assignments in the future. And when I hit send, that simply sends that off to them. Again, if I want to, I can change that to, for example, students who scored more than a particular amount. Or alternatively, what can be useful in the run up to an assignment or kind of after the deadline has passed is I can go into the gradebook. I can identify any students who have not yet submitted something for this assignment. And again, if I want to, I can type in a message, or again, I can use the record audio or video feature here to say, yeah, we don't need to do that, but to basically say 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is your lecture from the instructional design module. I just noticed that you haven't yet submitted anything. The deadline was yesterday at noon, so I really would strongly encourage you to submit something ASAP. You're far better to have something in now rather than trying to get it perfect and then losing another 10% because it's submitted next week. And again, that then it'll be sent out to any students who have not yet submitted against that particular assignment. If you want to as well, that feature is also available. If you go back to the home page and go into this area for new analytics, there is an option as well for module grade. And if I want to, I can click on this icon here to message students who, for example, scored between 40 to 60. Now, that 40 and 60 refers to their kind of average score or their kind of total score for this particular assignment. But again, the same process. It's just a very useful way of automatically identifying students whose work is late, whose work hasn't been submitted, who scored between a particular range for this module, and being able to send them a specific message. Because obviously the kind of feedback you'll be giving students who scored kind of quite low versus quite high, it's just a useful way of being able to automatically identify, okay, anyone who didn't do great in this assignment, I'm going to send them additional feedback. Anyone who did very well on this assignment, I'm going to send them some additional resources related to application or transfer. So that is it really. Just as a final element, just with a view to, let's say, coming assignments over the coming semester, we have a number of quite useful kind of guidelines inside on our website in the Digital for Teaching, Quick Guides for Staff. And just some general considerations. These are very kind of basic, very kind of common sense elements. But look, that's a lot of the problems or kind of issues people find, I think, very often relate to just making sure students have all the relevant information so they're not kind of bothering you about it, making sure an assessment is published and that the available from and until time are correct, that they're not kind of limiting access for students, making sure that students can access the assignment, can they see everything they're supposed to, and can they not see things they're not supposed to. And again, a very good way of doing that is by simply going into the assignment, clicking on the student view option, and then making sure that kind of students are seeing what they're meant to be seeing. And maybe just as a final point, the way students can actually see your marks and feedback is if they go into the module, they go into the grades area, and from here they'll be able to see the marks and feedback that you've given them. So that's it. I know that there were a couple of Q&As that came up there, but if anybody has any final questions, I'm more than happy to answer those now. I'm sure Shane answered all of the questions very well and thoroughly. But if anybody does have any questions, or if there's any other comments on YouTube or anything, certainly be happy to take those now.
Thanks a million, Dara. I think one interesting thing, I suppose, with any exports from, say, from the gradebook or from the rubric tool, for example, there's a lot possible in terms of filtering and ordering when you export that stuff out as Excel sheets. So you kind of extend out the functionality of Canvas. So Canvas is limited to an extent in terms of what you can report and filter, but if you export, for example, your grades from the gradebook, you can do a lot of extra filtering and annotation. And also, as one of the attendees asked there a while ago, with rubric reports, you can do something similar. So you can get, you can look at averages and stuff like that when you get a bit more advanced in Excel spreadsheets. So that also holds true for things like, your reports from the analytics tool, which we'll be covering in a few weeks for kind of the mid-semester check-in. There's a lot possible when you export that stuff out and do additional filtering and ordering in Excel. So I think that was something that was a nice one. There was also a good tip there from Roddy O'Keefe on the comment library and just how you might use naming conventions to filter out comments in your comment library. I thought that was good by module name. So I shared that there with Roddy's permission. I'm not sure if there's any other questions anyone has. You can post them into the Q&A, but also I suppose, look, if any of you are stuck or want any guidance, particularly over the next few days in releasing grades, or if you have any questions, feel free to get on to us on edtech@mtu.ie. We're dealing with a lot of tickets at the moment, but that's good. It's quite a busy week or 2 weeks in the context of releasing feedback or even just setting up your modules and so on. Dara, I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add there.
No, really. Just thanks for it. That's a really excellent point from Roddy. So thanks very much for that, Roddy. I hadn't thought of that at all, but that makes perfect sense. But no, otherwise, just, if there's no other questions, just thanks everyone for your time and for your attention. And yeah, everything we covered is in the help articles. There'll be a recording of this session. Canvas Tier 1 support is always available. So yeah, so definitely don't suffer in silence if you're stuck with anything at all. But otherwise, thanks very much, everyone, and hope that everyone has a good rest of the week and weekend. And just to mention that there'll be another training session happening next Tuesday at the same time at 10:15. I think that's correct, is it, Shane?
That's right, yeah. Yep.
Great. We leave it there. So thanks so much, everyone.